Hello again, everybody. Horseman Don. Don Stevens here on the Horseman Don YouTube channel. We thank you so much for joining us today. And today, my good friend Michael Chamberlain, joining us from Lafayette, Louisiana, and I are joined by our special guest today, Jesse Ullery, up in Lexington, Kentucky. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. This is a pleasure, and certainly the new way that we're all doing things and communicating. So it's fun to be joining you guys today.
Yeah, this ought to be a lot of fun because we love talking horse racing. We like to get new people in. And at the end of the show, we're going to get Jesse's picks for a race down at Gulfstream Park tomorrow, along with Michael's picks and my picks. We had a big response to our handicapping show we did last Friday on the YouTube channel as we covered those big races over at Oaklawn Park. So stick around as we handicap the Sunshine Forever coming up tomorrow with Gulfstream Park with a horse you may recognize from the Triple Crown Trail from last year. Okay, let's get into this, Michael. You're good friends with Jesse. How long have you known him?
Oh my gosh, Jesse, it's probably going on 15, 20 years, isn't it? Somewhere in that neighborhood?
I would say so. I think the first time that I met Michael is when he started at Sam Houston. My aunt was a racing official down there. And I think the first Michael's first day in town, we went and we had sushi with my aunt and another racing official down there. So that's been quite some time ago.
That might have been the first time I ever had sushi too, because they kind of dragged me kicking and screaming, and now I'm a sushi connoisseur. My wife and I do sushi quite a bit when we're able to get out and go to a restaurant.
That's pretty cool. Well, so you guys have known each other a long time. Jesse and I have never met in person, but he's done a lot of work in Oklahoma. I've spent most of the years of my life in Oklahoma, around Oklahoma City, worked at Remington Park, was an announcer there. But let's go back, Jesse. If people aren't familiar, you're kind of not in the spotlight in the industry of horse racing, and we'll get all into that in just a moment. But as an announcer, people aren't hearing your voice every day. But tell us where you've worked and how you came up through the racing industry. I know you met Michael. You said, what, that was 1997, I guess.
Yeah.
So you've known for 20 years. Give us a quick, synopsis of your career.
So shortly after that, I moved to Phoenix after meeting Michael for the first time. I moved down there in 1999. And my grandfather would bring a string of horses down to Phoenix in the wintertime. He would train horses down there. He lives in Montana, but he would spend the winters in Phoenix. So I got to go to the racetrack as a kid. And even when I lived in Montana, I was always going to the small fair meets there, especially in Billings, where I spent some of the summers on the backside there. But anyway, fast forward to Phoenix, I got to go to the races there and, of course, met Luke Kreitbosch, who was calling the races there at the time and also called the races at Churchill Downs, and got to become friendly with him and got into announcing when I was in high school and tried to find a way to merge the two passions together, horse racing and announcing. And there was track announcing. So I actually went to Tulsa in 2009 to Fair Meadows. And I was originally going to work as a line technician working on the tote machines for United Tote, who was the provider. And 4 days before the meet started, they fired their track announcer. And so I went into to the general manager's office at the time, and I said, "Hey, I have some experience. I'd like to apply."
I think Jesse's
video when I was 19 years old.
Wow.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, because you mentioned Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken, one of the times I filled in for Luke out there while I was working in Houston, you came up to me at Turf Paradise and said hello, and we had a nice little conversation there, because I remember that vividly, because I said, geez, why didn't I invite him up to the booth to come talk to me? Because I it was one of those, I was trying to get up to the booth and get started with the day and everything, and I said, why didn't I can't bring him up to the booth? And because it would have been great to even have you call a race that day or whatever, and I'm just sitting there going, what a missed opportunity! How stupid on my part. And I remember that vividly, because I think that was something like 2001, somewhere in that neighborhood, because I filled in for him a couple of times out there.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I remember running into you in the Turf Club a couple of times. Just in passing, you were trying to get back. I think you would come down to say hello to your folks, maybe, who were attending the races that day.
I think that's right. Yes.
Yeah, and we ran into each other, and it's probably a good thing you didn't ask me to go upstairs, because I would have been petrified to call a race in front of my grandfather and my family. So it's probably a good thing that it didn't happen.
Well, I have two questions for you, Jesse. You mentioned Fair Meadows. I've watched races there and gone there before. We never called a race there. Can I ask who the announcer was that left right before you went up there? So I don't
yeah, I don't recall the guy's name, but I think he was also the Mutuals manager. And I don't remember who was there. But it's funny, like Luke actually was a track announcer there as well. It was back in maybe the early '90s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny that being friends with him and then getting in kind of the same circuits that he would have started out. I think one of the first places he called was G. Raleigh White Downs.
He always talked fondly of G. Raleigh White Downs.
Yeah. So he was. I think he went from there to Fair Meadows and a couple other places around there in the Southwest.
Well, it's kind of interesting we talk about Luke Kreitbosch because Michael says he was his mentor, right? We had Jim Byers on, who was kind of my mentor. Luke was loved by everybody and did a great job and got to Churchill. Unfortunately, passed away in 2008. But I want to ask you guys both, track announcer jobs are kind of a merry-go-round. One guy quits or leaves, and then another one fills in, which leaves another spot at another place. There's not a lot of these jobs around. So anytime there's an opening, all of us start talking. It's like busy bees moving around. But let's say Luke was still alive today. How much do you think the landscape would have changed in the announcer jobs between when he passed and now?
I probably wouldn't be still being an announcer, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah, because around 2008, when he passed away, the following year, Sam Houston actually cut my hours and cut me down, and basically had taken away my full-time status. And so that was early 2009, and I did call the quarter horse season there because I remember vividly hitting that exacta on Mind That Bird and Pioneer of the Nile at Sam Houston, having taken $2,100 out of their coffers, which really made me feel good.
Nice.
and then it was 4 months after that, I was helping Travis Stone at Louisiana Downs at the Super Derby. And and Frank Miramati was there for TVG. And he pulls me aside in the booth and says, "Hey, I'm going to call you next week with some Turf Paradise stuff." And I said, "Great," and because I was trying to hang on in the industry, but I had no real intention of going back to Houston at that point. And Frank said, "I'm going to TVG. They've got this thing for me full time. I'm going to go work there. Do you want the job at Turf Paradise?" And he had the GM, Vince Francia, on the phone with us. And I said, yeah. And I ended up going there for the next 6 years until we got together here in Louisiana.
Wow. It's funny how things work out, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, I would have had a similar situation there with it being at Will Rogers. I mean, when Terry Wallace retired, I had tried to get in at Oaklawn Park, and I was too young. I mean, I fully recognize that. I think I'd only been calling races a couple of years, but it was kind of the similar path. And I think the three of us share. I certainly do, and I think you guys do as well. Kind of interacting with the fans and enjoying the fans, and it's tough to do, obviously, when you're up on top of the roof for 5 hours a day. So basically, I had an opportunity to become a director of racing at Will Rogers Downs, and that was kind of my transition out of announcing. I still filled in a little bit when John Lees came in and had to go perform some other duties, but that was my kind of transition out of the announcer's booth and more into the management side of racing.
Yeah. Now that brings about another subject. You mentioned the announcer at Fair Meadows used to be the mutual man or held both titles at the same time. We've all started at small tracks. That really gives you a good background for moving forward, does it not? Because like at Remington Park, I was a chart caller, assistant media relations director. I wrote, a press release, barn notes and all that kind of stuff, hosted the Remington Park show, did the show, the Fox show, and then I did the announcing for the booth. And then, Michael, you did a lot of different hats, and you worked at a dog track before you ever called races.
Yes, that's right.
All those different things kind of build your career up to where we are today. So, Jesse, you think that's helped you a lot? You're now with Fasig-Tipton, right, in Lexington. So you're in the sales end of the business. But how did all those little tracks and all those experiences with different jobs set you up for what you do today?
There's no question it was an invaluable experience. I mean, Will Rogers, I was the first year that I was the track announcer there. So I started at Fair Meadows in 2007. And then I got the job at Will Rogers in 2008 and Blue Ribbon in 2008. So when I was at Will Rogers, I was the clocker, I was the morning line odds maker, also called the races as well. And then eventually became the assistant racing secretary there and at Fair Meadows. Helped in the office at Blue Ribbon. So I was always helping in the office during the week, and then you're calling the races on the weekends too. And I think I love to soak it up. I always took the opportunity to take whatever job I could. And then especially when I was director of racing at Fair Meadows and Will Rogers both, you'd have to fill in as the paddock judge or the clerk of scales every now and then. So it does get you sort of enveloped in horse racing. And then switching to the sales side, I think it really helps out. I mean, it's such both segments of the industry, I should say, are so reliant upon one another. I mean, it's the breeding end of things and the racing is directly tied to one another through the sales ring. So the better performance you have on the racetrack, obviously, the better success you're going to have in the sales ring. So having that understanding and that knowledge has really helped out with the current role that I'm in at Fasig-Tipton.
Yeah. Now going to Kentucky and doing what you do now, did you have to learn, because all of us are engaged in racing in different parts of the country and it can be regionalized. You were so embedded in the Oklahoma part of it. Did you have to get to know a lot of people and do a lot of networking? Because in the sales business in Kentucky, I think you'd have to know people all over the world almost for the people to come in for those big sales.
No question. I mean, your network goes from, what you thought was a large network to, it quadruples in size instantly. And it went from not only dealing with just the trainers and the owners and the horsemen on that side of things. Now you're involved with breeders, you're involved with consigners. So there's a whole new segment of the industry that you're exposed to, and it's instantaneous. And it is in the heart of the thoroughbred industry. There's more thoroughbreds that are born here than other states. So it's very impactful here. But yeah, it was a little bit of a culture shock. It was kind of funny. I mean, the people who I grew up reading about, Dean Wayne Lucas, Steve Asmussen, I mean, those guys who you kind of saw on TV and they're the ones doing the interviews. Now you go up and sort of have a one-on-one conversation with them, and it's like, holy cow, pinch me. This is crazy. But at the end of the day, it's very refreshing. They're horsemen and they care about the horse and they're enthusiastic about the industry. So there is that common bond, and it's incredibly refreshing.
Yeah.
Now, and previously to working at Fasig-Tipton, Jesse, you did work at Keeneland, and not only working in the sales aspect of that, but because I vividly recall you being on camera and doing interviews with these horsemen, the personalities you're talking about. And as you say, you're going from reading about these people to interviewing these people on, basically national simulcast television, everything like that. What kind of things would you do to prepare for that aspect of what you had to do?
Honestly, as far as the interviews go, there was no preparation. I'm kind of the person, especially when I read a pedigree or I'm doing an interview like that, I like to be somewhat spontaneous. And it's almost like a race call. I mean, when I was calling races, I didn't necessarily like to plan things out, or if a certain horse was going to win the feature, I didn't want to have a line ready because I inevitably would stumble over the top of it. So I handicapped the race and would have an idea, and that way I could, make that comment from a horse player's perspective, saying, hey, this is a horse that's usually on the lead now. He's not today. So I did that and threw that in. But as far as that goes, there wasn't a lot of prep work. I mean, when I did the handicapping show, that was far different. It was replays. It was very, very in-depth that I wouldn't necessarily handicap on a normal day, but I wanted to provide horse players the best information possible, trip notes, etc. So that was far more detailed. But from the interview process, I hate to say it, there really wasn't a whole lot of prep work that went into it. It was more reacting to what happened in the race. And I just think you get more genuine responses that way when it's sort of spur of the moment. And I would ask questions that I would want to know. I mean, sometimes it may not have worked out in the interview, but there were questions that I had just kind of out of curiosity more than anything.
Yeah. Ask you about that. Tell everybody, if they're not familiar, what your jobs have been and what your job is now in the sales business. What specifically do you do day to day and during the sale?
So the day-to-day operations when we're not having a sale is I'm an account executive. So I talk to buyers and consigners on a daily basis, to breeders as well. I'm on the inspection team for the yearlings. So I go out and inspect the yearlings for our select sales. Obviously, this year with COVID-19, our sales calendar is a little more jumbled than it has been in years past. And so normally we would have been inspecting for the Saratoga sale that we have every year in New York during the Saratoga race meet. But now we've moved that to September. We're going to have that September the 9th and 10th here in Lexington. So now we're looking at horses for that select sale. And we'll start that process now that the state has kind of lifted the stay-at-home restrictions. We're going to start going to the farms and looking at yearlings. So that's a very fun part of the process, going and identifying the yearlings, saying, yeah, this is a horse that's going to hit our target audience for a buying bench. And then hopefully they're rewarded for that in the sales ring, and it's a very gratifying experience.
Okay. What goes into those inspections that you conduct?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it truthfully depends on the sale. I mean, when you're talking about a select sale, so we usually have two select sales during the year. We have the July sale, which obviously is canceled this year, and then we have the Saratoga sale. So what you're looking for there in July is you're kind of looking for a forward horse, a horse that physically is maybe a little bit more mature than others. And it's been a very successful sale for both what we deem end users, which are people who have no intention of reselling the horse at a later date, but you also have pin hookers, which are people who buy horses as yearlings and then sell them as 2-year-olds. But there's also other types of pin hooking. You buy it as a weanling and sell it as a yearling. So there's multiple forms of pin hooking, but that's another target audience for July. They like to buy those forward horses because they know that in March and April, when they have the traditional 2-year-old sales, those horses are going to be probably further ahead physically and be able to perform at a better rate than some horses. Yeah. So that's one aspect of it, is the physical nature of the horse. But then you're also looking for pedigree. We want to try to put the best pedigrees and the best physicals in front of the buyers and let them try to pick out the horse that whatever they're trying to accomplish, whether it's winning a race at Saratoga first time out, winning a race at Oaklawn, or finding a Louisiana bred to go to the Louisiana Champions Days down there. So there's a number of things that go into it, but basically when you boil it down, best physicals, best pedigrees.
Now, I have to ask you, that's the sales and the intricacies of that, but what about the sale itself? Have you ever worked, since you have the announcing background, the race calling background, have you worked in the ring during the sale itself and maybe work with the auctioneer and things like that?
So I'm right on the podium with the auctioneer. Okay. And actually I went to auctioneer school in 2010, somewhere in there.
I did too. We got something in common.
Yeah. So
I did it in 2000 in Oklahoma, but I went to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have that background as well, but it's intense. My first November sale for Fasig-Tipton was just last year, and had recruited a few of the mares that participated in that sale. And it's one night only, and it is one heck of a night. I believe we have 21 or 22 horses that sold for over $1 million. Oh, gosh. And the adrenaline that is going is insane. I mean, I believe I was on the stand for Belvoir Bay, for Shamrock Rose, who are obviously incredibly accomplished race horses, both Grade 1 winners, one of which being an Eclipse Award winner. So it was, at the time, I should say, one was an Eclipse Award winner. But yeah, it's amazing commerce that in 3 minutes we're bringing in this horse who's a champion, and then they're going off to their potentially second career after that. But the atmosphere is electric. The stand.
And I can tell you something. I have been in front of a microphone pretty much since I was in high school. So we're talking going 30, 35 years here. And Jesse has been somebody that's been trying to get me involved in announcing in the sales ring and everything like that. It is a completely different kind of nervous than I have ever experienced being on the podium, reading off this page. I'm trying to make sure I get all the information right and I don't mess it up. And it's so foreign to me from calling a horse race where, you're describing what's going on as it's happening.
Right.
As opposed to everything is black and white in front of you. It's kind of the difference between hitting a baseball and hitting a golf ball, because, one is static and one is moving coming at you. So it really was a learning experience for me that I haven't had in so many years when Jesse started getting me introduced into doing sales announcing.
Well, and that brings up another point. Michael, you have done a few sales. I've done one actually at Evangeline Downs in the Event Center a few years ago. Used to have a sale there. They don't have it there anymore. But you've worked at Copper Crown, am I not?
Yes. Yes.
Copper Crown. And so, what was that like the first time you did that? Both of you, you tell me your first experience. I know what my first experience was like calling a race. I was a nervous wreck. The binoculars were shaking all over the place. I called the first 5 out of 12 horses. They were bunched up. I couldn't get the rest, and I felt like a total failure when I was done. But my mentor, Jim Byers, kept pushing me. And by the end of the week, I called 3 or 4 races, and I finally settled down. But instead of a minute and a half or 2 minutes, you guys have to stay at a competent high level of what you're doing for hours. So tell me how you deal with that. Either one of you.
Well, thankfully, you know, John Henderson, who is a very experienced sales announcer, legend in the industry, has come down, and he has been the main announcer here at the Louisiana Sales each of the times that I've been able to work over at the Copper Crown Training Center. And I basically have just filled in for him, given him a break, 45 minutes at a clip a couple of times during those long days. So it's been a good experience for me to do that. As I mentioned, dealing with that pressure of, making sure that I get that information right, get it out there, and, incorporate the updates that John has accumulated for each of these different horses. It really has been a new experience for me in racing, which I do appreciate, and I thank Jesse very much for that. I do want to make sure I make that point. So it's as I said, it's a different kind of pressure. I remember the first race I ever called at Turf Paradise, 6-horse field. I was working in radio, and they said, let's get the radio idiot up here, make him, all have a good laugh, ha ha ha. And I did okay. I didn't, obviously I did okay. I even had a 3-horse photo that I got to rise to the moment too, which was great. But it's a completely different kind of pressure that, I hadn't experienced. And it really made me appreciate a lot of what Jesse does, and a lot of what guys like John Henderson and Kurt Becker doing the auctioneering. And it really is a completely different kind of pressure for me.
So Jesse, what was it like for you the first time, and then how do you deal with the long stretches you have to be on the mic?
So it's funny, when I was 14 years old, I actually sent a tape to Fasig-Tipton. And again, acknowledging that I was full well too young to be doing this. But I sent a tape, and, just thought it would be something that I was always interested in pedigrees. And so I thought, well, hey, maybe I'll try being a sales announcer, and sent them a tape. And, here we are 16 years later now, and it's all come full circle. So, but yeah, so transfer from what I thought a sales announcer did when I was 14 years old to the first time I got on the stand, where I couldn't catch my breath for the entire half hour that I was on there. Yeah, and it's two totally different things. So that first off, the similarities are, you do kind of, with sales announcing, obviously you're giving a sales pitch,
right?
But much like when I called a race, where I try to view it from the standpoint of the horse player or the owner or the trainer, and kind of, view it from that standpoint, I view it as, hey, this is my 45-second opportunity to give this horse a sales pitch. And the only difference is, when you're calling a race, you don't get another shot at it. Right. Whereas in sales announcing, if there's something you left out that first time, you can get back in usually for a second speech when the bidding slows, and re-emphasize some things. But with that said, I try to, in that first 45-second window, just really hammer the points home. This is a full or a half sibling to a stakes horse. The mother was a stakes winner. It's by Tappet or Curlin or Warfront. You try to hit him with some stats, but also try to have an artistic element to it as well.
Yeah,
Jesse, what is the one thing that a casual horse racing fan, or even an expert handicapper, might not know about the sale process or the sales environment that would kind of surprise them a little bit?
That's actually a good question. I had never really considered what the casual handicapper or the casual race fan. I think basically all the prep work that goes into it. I kind of equate it to when people show up who are maybe novice race fans. Even they go to the races and they say, "Oh, there's 10 races today, and there's 9 horses in every race," and that's great. But they don't understand that this whole process of getting that one horse to a race started 30 days ago, when you start working the horse up to the race. And I guess it's kind of a similar concept with the sales end of things. There's a lot of prep work that goes into this. These horses are hand walked. I can't say that they're trained necessarily, but I mean, there's you have to teach them how to stand. You have to teach all these aspects to present them in their best light. So I guess that would be one aspect of it that a common fan might not realize it takes place in the sales end.
How much different is your voice when you're doing that work as it is to right now when you're just talking to me? Because obviously when Michael and I get on a microphone in the booth, we have a mic voice, different. What is your voice like when you're doing that work?
I mean, I know exactly what you guys are talking about, unfortunately, because everybody says that takes place. Do we really have mic voices? I don't know the difference.
My wife, because my wife used to work when I was at Turf Paradise. I would go down and talk to her, trying to get her, to go out on a date and everything, because this is before we, started going. And she would say to me, well, your voice when you're announcing and your voice when you're talking are so different. And I don't hear a difference. I don't. And that's why I started laughing when Don said, because Don's wife says the same thing. My wife says the same thing. And I just don't hear it.
Right.
And the biggest thing is that sound is optimized to your voice. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, it's a professional sound system. You're speaking into a microphone. Right. So it is, sort of a synthesized version, if you will, of what you sound like, just talking and speaking over the phone. So, I mean, that's one aspect of it where the mic voice, if you will, that's where that comes from.
Well, my wife or anybody who visits the booth will notice I'll be sitting there talking away like this, and they'll say, hang on just a second, I'll hit the button, 2 minutes to post. Okay, then we'll go back. And I'm like, okay, there's your mic voice. So anyway, well, that's very fascinating. I have to ask you one last question before we go on to handicap the race at Gulfstream Park. And we do value your handicapping, believe wealth of experience. And I think in this race, we got a lot of different picks, it looks like. But I have to ask you, do you ever want to get back into race calling? Do you ever get that itch to want to get back in the booth?
So it's funny. So when I first came to Fasig-Tipton in 2018, in late November 2018, one of my first trips for the company was to go to Remington Park for the Springboard Mile. And I had gone there previously on recruiting trips from my other job, but when I went to Fasig-Tipton, that was kind of the first place I went to. So I showed up on the Saturday before Springboard Mile, which was a Sunday card, and flew in. I think I left Lexington at 6 o'clock in the morning, got in there at 11, had some lunch with some friends, went and checked into the hotel, then came back and went to the backside to check in with a few of my friends who worked in the racing office there and still do. And it was about 5:45. I walk into the assistant racing secretary's office, and he says, "Hey, do you want to make some money tonight?" And I'm thinking he's got a horse for me to bet on.
Yes,
There's a first
that's it. When you hear that at the track.
Yeah, I'm like, let's make some money. What do you got? He goes, "Well, Dale's wife has to go. Dale Day, his wife has to go to the emergency room, and we don't have a track announcer right now. Can you call the races tonight?" And I was like, "Whoa, that is not what I was expecting." But I called Boyd Browning, who's our president and CEO, and I said, "Boyd, this is not the reason that I'm here, but they're in a jam. Can we help them out?" And he said, "Absolutely." He said, "That's what we're all about as a company. If you're comfortable with it, I think it's great that they asked you to do it. And if you want to do it, you absolutely have my blessing." So there I was at 5:45, getting ready to call races at Remington Park off of basically a 4-year layoff.
Wow.
And luckily my mom, who lives in Tulsa now, and my aunt, who lives in Tulsa, they'd come down to visit. And I said, "Listen, there's a Dollar General down the street. Go get me some crayons and markers."
You're a color guy, right? You like
absolutely, I'm a color guy.
Color guys are all alike.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I got it. That's the one security blanket I had. I didn't have my binoculars. I didn't have.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I didn't have anything. And so, but to continue on, I mean, so there I was, an hour and 15 minutes to post. I ran up to the top of the grandstands. Matt Vance got me settled in and called the races that night. And the first race was like a mile race, 8-horse field. And I was begging for some oxygen about the quarter pole. It was it was life or death. And it was a lot of fun. It was great. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I do enjoy it. But I really enjoy what I do now and getting to work with owners, breeders, consigners, buyers. I mean, it's a great group of folks to work with. I don't think there's any bad job in this industry, and that's what's so
If you love
fantastic.
horse racing, there's not a bad job. Seriously, there's really
No.
And before we get to the handicapping part of it too, I have one final question as well. All right, I know you're a Packers fan, Jesse. What do you think of them taking Jordan Love in the draft?
I gotta ask him that.
I want your honest opinion.
Not pleased. Not pleased.
Not pleased.
I think it's. I mean, it's the same thing that Aaron Rodgers had to go through with Brett Favre, and I know there's been several interviews with Favre about it, that he kind of had to handle the similar situation. I just didn't think in the first round that's a spot where you take a guy. I mean, I have no issue with trying to find successor to Aaron Rodgers. That's fine. But I'm just not sure the first round was a place to do it. But I'm also not an NFL GM, so.
Yeah. I mean, if they were going to go with the quarterback, were you surprised they went with him? I mean, I think he led the nation, didn't he, last year in interceptions or something with 16? Seemed like he had a bunch.
It's like, hey, we're going back to the Favre days. We're going back to the gunslinger days.
Gunslinger.
Yeah. So they're sort of reverting back to their old ways, but we'll see. I mean, it's a new coach. The front office is newer. Compared to what you might deem the heyday of the Packers in the late 90s through the 2000s. So I think it's new, and it's also very interesting. They don't have a Jerry Jones or an owner making the directive. I mean, it's basically a co-op that is the ownership board there. So they kind of have liberties, if you will, to do some different things and think outside of the box. But hey, hopefully we have another conversation, another Skype call in 10 years, and you can say how wrong were you about that.
There you go. Well, I know both of you guys. Go ahead.
And the other question is, where's your Mariners hat?
Yeah.
Clearly missed the memo on that one.
Day, huh? We did not.
And we have to say, Don, we did not plan this. I picked out a hat at random. He picked out a hat at random because I have 100 and some odd hats that I could, and I just grabbed this one this morning.
I just grabbed this one, so there you go. It was dark blue. It went with my shirt, and I got the Seahawks shirt on here. I got to represent there anyway. Hey, you guys play in a fantasy football league. Speaking of that, so who's going to beat whom this year? I mean, get some trash talking here for a few seconds.
Well, he's got Lamar Jackson, and I have Pat Mahomes as our keepers going into the year.
Oh.
So we're set at the quarterback position, but after that, we'll have to see what we can do in the draft.
Unless
it all comes down to the draft.
That happened before too,
Huh?
And unless one of them gets injured, like you went through.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I remember Mahomes actually got knocked out in that Thursday night game against Denver last year, and that actually cost me the win that week because I had started and I could not put Tom Brady, my backup, in, and I ended up getting beat by like 4 points, and that kind of derailed my season. We'll just put it that way.
Well, that's the wild card when you're playing fantasy sports is injuries, but. Okay, let's now move our way into handicapping the Sunshine Forever at Gulfstream Park tomorrow. This is going to be a $75,000 stake, and it's for 4-year-olds and up on the grass at 1 1/16 miles. So, first of all, Jesse, real quick, how much do you enjoy the handicapping aspect of horse racing?
Absolutely love it. That was actually that was one of the disadvantages of being a director of racing. Is as a racing official, I couldn't wager. But now that I've kind of switched out of the racetrack management side of things, and I can enjoy the races again and wager on the races, absolutely love the handicap. I think it's a great puzzle, and it suits my style and it suits my personality.
Fantastic. Well, this race of 12, it has a big horse from the Triple Crown last year in War of Will who drew the outside. The one horse, Just Whistle, is a main track only, so he may be on the post number 11 here, right? If we draw in, if the race does go on the turf. And right now, I think Michael said the forecast was for dry weather, right?
Yes, it's supposed to be 87 degrees and maybe a 10% chance of rain tomorrow. So I would expect this race to go on the turf on a firm turf course. So I think we're looking forward to a really good stakes race tomorrow at Gulfstream.
Well, if I know anything about South Florida, there is every day a 10% chance of rain. So that's like zero. So it can always bubble up and rain in South Florida. My mother-in-law lives there, and I know well about that. But anyway, okay, since we have a guest on the show, Michael and I are going to defer to Jesse to give us his top 4 horses. Jesse, let her rip and give us a winner.
Well, it's a very interesting race. I ended up going to the 6 Halliday. It doesn't look like there's a lot of speed in this race. I think Luis Saez is very good on the lead. This horse ran a huge buyer last time out. I'm not sure if he's going to bounce off of that effort or not, especially coming back in just 4 weeks. I guess it's 5 weeks now. But the distance shouldn't be an issue for an overnight stakes race. Clearly a very, very difficult spot. This could easily be a grade 3 or a grade 2, considering the competition that's in there. But to me, he looks like the lone speed. I think speed does very well at Gulfstream. If you can get anywhere near that 4-1, which I think you will, because War of Will at 10-1 completely baffles me. I think how this horse is not the post time favorite, or at least maybe the second choice, is beyond me. I think he's going to come well off that 10-1 morning line. So I think from a value perspective, Halliday is where you get that most value. Do you guys want me to do all 4 picks or just?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go all the way.
Give us the cold superfected, Jesse.
The cold superfected 6497.
There you go.
I'm going against a War of Will, and I'll explain that in a minute. But for a horse for second, I like Aquaphobia. I think this horse coming out of a grade 2 down to the fairgrounds, Mike Maker and Irad Ortiz, they're like 27% nationally when they team up. That's a huge, huge number. And I like that stat. I like to pay attention to jockey trainer combinations. This horse, if you look at the running lines, he actually lost the whip in his last race. He was 5 wide at the quarter pole, so he's going to be able to save some ground in this race. He's cutting back from 1.8 miles to 1 1/16 miles, which I think is a more preferable distance. And he's a win or 2 back. He runs mid-90s buyers pretty consistently. Maker's done very well with this horse, 3rd off the claim. So I think this is a horse that you could get a great price on. He likes to run 1 1/16 miles. He's 12 for 15 in the money. So this is a horse at 10-1 with Irad Ortiz. Could really be a horse to watch for a price. And then I like Social Paranoia. I don't think he's going to get the best of trips from the 9 post. This horse is kind of a deep closer, and I just don't think there is enough early speed for him to benefit from that. While there is speed with Halliday, I don't think there's a horse that's necessarily going to go out and challenge him, especially with blinkers coming off War of Will. I don't think that horse will be forwardly placed. So lone speed kind of plays against a horse who likes to come from off the pace. But if Social Paranoia can be closer, like he is in the 1 5/16 races or the 1 1/4 races, where he tends to be a little bit closer, he could have a shot here. But 1 1/16, I don't think he has enough early speed to be closer than last, where he came from in that last race to win. And Edgar Zayas gets aboard. But the one thing he does have, he's 2 for 2 at Gulfstream. This horse is kind of the horse for course angle. So even if you get 3-1 on this horse, because like we talked about, War of Will is going to take a lot of attention. If you can get 3-1, or if this horse is a little bit of an overlay at 5-1, I might have to move that horse a little bit further up in the ticket, just because he's a legitimate contender. And then to round out the superfecta, I went with Hawkish off the layoff. If you look, this horse has had a similar time off before, so I like to go and look at those repeat running lines. So if you go back to July the 7th of 2018, he ran 1 1/4 miles, and then his next start was in March of 2019, and he was second that day, just beating a half length. So I think with that similar, this horse is a horse who's proven he can come off of a layoff and be competitive. He doesn't necessarily have to win the race to round out your trifecta and superfecta tickets, but at 10-1, pretty healthy price. Jimmy Toner doesn't have the best stats off of a layoff, but wins doesn't necessarily mean that's not a horse that you can't use to round out the tickets. And again, going against War of Will, before we segue into you guys, not to take up all the time here, but he gets back on the turf, and I'm not trying to knock a classic winner by any stretch of the imagination, and especially with Mark Casse on the turf. And this horse is clearly bred for the turf, but you've got to go back to his early running lines here. He's actually had 4 starts on the turf. And I remember watching this horse as a 2-year-old up at Woodbine, and he would just never pass horses. He would always get up towards the lead, and he would just never go by him on the turf course. Kind of hung. He never had that instinct that he has on the dirt. When he went and ran on the dirt, he's a tremendous horse. I mean, he has that killer instinct. He wants to pass horses. So that's my only concern about War of Will. And I mean, he's clearly in a good spot here for his first start back to try the turf again. But I just wonder if he's truly a turf horse.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we'll go to Michael here in just a second. But just as a hunch play, your third pick in here, Social Paranoia, social distancing. I don't know. Just a thought right there.
I was going to make that point too, because I got him in the top 4 myself.
Okay, Michael, let her rip. What's your superfecta look
Well,
like?
I actually am picking a horse that Jesse did not mention in here, and that is number 11, Admission Office. 5-2 on the morning line. Did have the lead late last time out in the Mac de Armida, the grade 2 down there. Zulu Alpha, who is just one of the finer turf horses in the country right now, was the horse that got by to defeat Admission Office. And Joel Rosario is going to get the ride on this one tomorrow in the Sunshine Forever. And I do like Admission Office as my top pick, although in 3 starts at Gulfstream Park on the grass, has finished second twice and is yet to win. So that will be an interesting angle to take a look at there. I do have the 9, Social Paranoia, second for Todd Pletcher off those back-to-back wins, including the grade 3 Appleton over this very turf course. Third pick is the 12, War of Will, the Preakness winner last year. And if he didn't get hammered to heck by Maximum Security, he might have actually won the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown last year, given the way he was moving up at Louisville. But I do have that one third. And my 4th choice in here is going to be number 6, Jesse's top pick, Halliday, with those 2 wins in the last 3 starts. So I have it myself 11, 9, 12, 6. For my top 4 in the Sunshine Forever tomorrow afternoon.
Okay. It's funny. We have all different top picks in here, but I agree with so many of you guys' points. It's funny how one handicapper gets into another handicapper's heads, and I've got red marks all over my PPs here, which is how I do this. And a lot of the things you were pointing out, both of you, are things I've circled and marked, and it's, it's funny how we come up with the same stuff. But I went ahead and went with the 10-1 long shot Aqua. Use this one second. I like the angle. This is 3rd time with Michael Maker. He won that first race at Gulfstream February 17th, came back and finished 4th. You mentioned lost the whip and 5 wide. I got 2 X's next to that. That's my little shorthand for excuses. He had 2 excuses. He goes to Irad Ortiz, always a plus in here. He's had 3 starts this year, so he should be in a good form cycle. He's only 1 for 5 at Gulfstream Park. He's got the most turf wins of any horse in the field at 8, although he is a 7-year-old, so he's kind of getting up in age. But I think that I'm going to pull the trigger and think we're going to get some pretty good odds on this horse. Ortiz in the saddle may knock that down a little bit, but I do think I'm going to go with the long shot. I'm not going to pick the chalk. Last week, Michael, in 2 of those 3 races at Oakland, I picked the Baffert horses, which were obvious, and they won. And then you had the long shot in the middle. So if anybody watched us, they got the pick 3. They didn't pay a whole lot, but we got it anyway. Number 11, Admission Office, is my second pick in here. I think all the odds here are going to be on the outside. You're all right about the 12, War of Will. What in the world were they thinking at 10-1 morning line? He and Admission Office, I think, are going to be the 2 favorites in here on the outside. And if it is on the turf, the 1 won't be there. So they're going to be in post number, 10 and 11 instead of 11 and 12. But his 2 Brisnet speed figures on the turf last time out, going farther distances of 104 and 107. He had middle pace numbers of 103 and 121. Oh, he's going to be a monster. And I know people that look at those speed figures often determine the odds. Joel Rosario has ridden this horse before. If you notice, about 6, 7, 8 starts back, he had a win, a close second, a very close third. Experience with a horse. I like that. 0 for 3 at Gulfstream. That was a knock I used in picking the long shot. And so I'm going to go against him and put him second. But I think he's going to be, him and War of Will are going to vie for favoritism in here, I believe. I have the 6 in here for 3rd, and that is Holiday. That is Jesse's top pick, correct? Todd Pletcher, Luis Saez, 2 for 2, the horse for the course angle. He's been on the board in 8 of 9 on a turf, including 4 wins, and he comes off a resounding win April 4th, and that was after a little bit of time off. His pace numbers were good on the lead. Like you said, there's not a lot of pace. Expect him to go out quickly and maybe play catch me if you can. And from the 6th hole, he should put in a pretty good trip, I think, from there. And then Social Paranoia, my hunch play. Love the name here. Todd Pletcher and Edgar Zayas here in on a 2-race winning streak. Adds a little bit of distance, but again, 2 for 2 at the distance here. On the board, 8 of 9 over the turf. And he was 12th at a 12-horse field last time out. Came from last to first to win. Pace was a little bit quicker than normal in there, but he can also run close to the pace like he did 2 back, going 1 mile and 5/16. So distance shouldn't be a problem for him there. So I've got it 4, 11, 6, 9. Michael, you have it 11, 9, 12, 6, and Jesse has it 6, 4, 9, 7. So we've got a hodgepodge of horses in there, but I think it comes down to about we stay with the same mainly 5 or 6 horses. I think there are some throwouts in this race. Do you guys agree with that?
Oh yes, I think so.
Every race, you've got to throw somebody out. Anyway.
Yeah, you can't bet them all. That's one lesson you learn early. You can't bet them all.
No, you can't bet them all. If you do, you're going to go broke really quickly. So anyway, we've gone longer than we thought we'd go, but we about 45 minutes here. But we hope everybody enjoyed this. Jesse, we want to say thank you so much for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're doing a great job, and I know you're doing a great job. And up there, it must be really challenging with all this lockdown stuff and things going on. So be safe. Get out in the field. Look at those yearlings and weanlings, and get us set for some great champions to come through your ring in the future. Okay.
Hope so. Hopefully, we'll find the future Derby winner this year that'll go through the Fasig-Tipton auction ring. And I appreciate you guys having me on. A lot of fun.
Thanks so much. And Michael, thank you so much again. And we were reading minds with our Mariners hats today. Yeah?
I'll be sure to let you know what hat I'm wearing next time we do this.
All right. Well, I want to remind everybody again, thanks for watching this on the YouTube channel, HorseManDon. Make sure and subscribe. Hit the bell next to the subscribe button. That way you get alerts every time we put up a video. And it really helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you leave a comment below, we'll interact with you. Michael and I interact with those comments, and hopefully they're positive. And we'll get back to you and love to hear some questions for the next show that we have. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time here on the HorseManDon channel. Thanks, guys.